Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Thank you, everyone. It's me again. I'm back here upstage, starting my timer. Unlike yesterday, this is a presentation I've done many times, but the odd thing is, most of them have been online. One of the odd things here is that back BC, before COVID, I'd been working with a team, and I was coaching them in Agile, as I do. That's what I do. And the organization had decreed, thou shalt use OKRs. Boom, just dropped us on it. And me and all the other Agile coaches were like, okay, we've heard of them, but none of us have used them in anger. And we were all a bit suspicious. And I could give you 20 good reasons why OKRs were not a good idea, and why they were dangerous, and why they were not agile, and all the rest of it. But you know what? I decided to bite my lip and run a little experiment, and to run with them and see what happened. And as the year went on, I came to see promise in them. The team got better at doing things. I saw how we needed to adapt our style. And I started to see how OKRs had the potential to strip back Agile. And then the world came to an end. And certainly in the UK, I was just sitting at home going, what do I do now? What do I do now? So since I write books, I started putting some notes together, which eventually grew into this book. And you'll be glad to know I'm going to give away another copy. So similar deal to yesterday. If you go across to that different URL from yesterday, if you go across to that one, put your name in. I will draw a name over lunch, and I'll leave it at the front desk. And since we did this yesterday, and to make it more interesting, somebody else will get a copy of the product owner book. So first name I draw out will get the OKR book. Second person will get the product owner book. Just go along there while I'm talking, because you're all on your phones anyway, aren't you? So this book came out of it, and the more I got into it, the more I realized that there was real potential here. But we needed to change some things. We needed to let go of some things. I was just saying to somebody a moment ago, if we treat OKRs or Agile or any other process improvement you want to talk about, if we treat them as purely additive, we end up with more process, more administration, more wasted time pushing bits of paper, if you like. We have to remove things. We have to take things back. If we're not taking something away, all we're doing is adding to our non-productive administration time. And that, I think, is the key thing here. So let's push on. If you don't know, OKRs stand for Objectives and Key Results. They are famous for coming out of Intel and being adopted by Google, and they made Google what Google is today, yay! Or at least if you read the OKR Kool-Aid books, that's what they say. The book most famous about OKRs, Measure What Matters. The author came out of the Intel culture, and looking at some of the examples in there, I cringe. I think that was Intel in 1970, and I don't think any of you work for Intel. Anybody actually work for Intel? No. And it's not 1970. I double-checked that before I came on stage. So I think the world has moved on, particularly in the world of Agile. So I think we need to reinterpret that. We need to find our own way with this stuff. Objectives. What do you really want? What is your goal? What is your outcome? What is the benefit you are trying to deliver to somebody? Not a feature, not functionality, not a milestone on a plan. Something that makes a difference to somebody, an outcome, right? Probably bigger, probably ambitious. Key results. This is where it gets difficult, okay? Key results. Oh, sorry, I just said that. Key results. These are the important contributors. These are the bounding criteria. These are the acceptance criteria. These are sometimes smaller goals which build towards the objective. Although, increasingly, I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea that the objective is to build the house for your kids, and the key results are the Lego bricks, and the key results tell you which bits you're building. I think we need to move more towards this idea that key results are the acceptance criteria. They are the key criteria by which you will judge your success with this OKR. They are not smaller pieces. They are not features, functions, stories, whatever. But more of that as we go on. And perhaps controversially, the difficult bit, the thing that makes OKRs really hard, is that they're quantified. We put numbers against them. And this can be really dangerous. Some of the later chapters in the book, I talk about the problems with quantification. And, do you know the story about 10, 15 years ago, maybe more, still goes on to some degree, British hospitals were set targets. And one of the targets was to discharge some types of patients within 48 hours. And some hospitals found they could meet this target by discharging patients into the car park, waiting 10 minutes and then readmitting them. So instead of having a patient in for 72 hours and missing the target, they have 2 patients in for less than 48 hours and meet the target. Quantifying them is really powerful and forces us to have some difficult conversations. But once you start gaming the metrics, once you start distorting, and once you start distorting your own practices to meet them, you kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So, like with so many other things, OKRs can be used for good, and they can be used for evil. And I'd like you to use them for good. But before we go too far, we have to talk about the virus. As I said, one virus was responsible for me writing the book in the first place, but the virus, that one we need to focus on today, is the one that's really important, and that is the Agile Virus. The Agile Virus was first identified in the year 2001. There's good reason to believe it was circulating before 2001, but 2001 was when we first got the DNA of the virus. And it is spread by technology use. People used to think it was software teams, but spread it around. No, it's technology use. Agile is the set of processes and ways of thinking and working that accompanies digital technology. As your business moves away from a manufacturing, as a production line, a menial operation, and it becomes a knowledge-based enterprise based on digital technology, you need to adopt working practices and processes that look an awful lot like Agile. It started in the software development community first, because software developers had the first access to digital technology. Who used the first email systems? Who had first access to email? Programmers. Who had the first instant messaging systems? Programmers. Who had the first website? Well, that would be Tim Berners-Lee. He was a programmer. Who had the first wiki? That would be Ward Cunningham. He was a programmer. They wrote them. Programmers had early access to digital technology because we created them. And in cases like Ward and Tim Berners-Lee, when we saw a need and we could conceive of a solution, we created that solution. And we still do. I don't know, is Simon Javier here? Simon? If you went to his talk, oh, there he is, right to the back. He went to his talk the other day yesterday on ensemble programming. And he talked about a tool his team had written to help them. And now that tool is out there in the wild. And even ThoughtWorks are singing his praises. Another example of programmers get early access to digital technology. And what you discover when you use digital technology, they're having a big brain at the center. You do this, you do that, you do the other. That's really inefficient. You're using digital technology. Machines are doing most of the hard work. In fact, most of you are managers. You probably hate me for saying that, but you manage machines. You instruct machines how to do work. In 1960, human managers instructed humans how to do work. Now you instruct machines. So Agile goes with digital technology. So the more digital technology is used, the more the Agile virus spreads. And as it spreads, as with other viruses you may know of, it mutates. And some of those mutations are worse. It becomes more dangerous, more difficult, more harder to stamp out. And some of those mutations are for the better. You know, perhaps it makes them milder. Perhaps it makes it less dangerous. So it mutates as it spreads. And one of the recent mutations has been the addition of OKRs to Agile. But this tends to happen with managers coming along and saying, thou shalt use OKRs. What, you don't know how to use OKRs? What's your problem? So this is one of the recent mutations. And I'm actually suggesting you take it further and you mutate it some more. So there's two clear strains of the Agile virus. One is what I have taken to calling corporate Agile. You might think of it as mild Agile. This gets into the organization. It makes things better than it was before, but it doesn't really shake things up. You still have a hierarchy. You still have people telling other people what to do. You still fill in project reports. You still have projects. You still have a load of testers testing for bugs which should never have been written in the first place. We dilute Agile, and we get this form of corporate Agile. And it's really unsatisfying. And the other is, I don't have a good name for it. I call it radical Agile. And you find this particularly at younger, more aggressive startups. You find it in some older companies. You find it in some consultancies who you may have heard of who are really good at this stuff. Nobody's perfect. We all have mistakes. But some organizations are more aggressive in their use of Agile, and they push it further. Where did continuous delivery come from? That came from mutating the Agile virus and making it more powerful. And guess what? It's better. So we see this form of radical Agile. And that's the one we're ambitious about. That's what we all want. Because that promises to make the world a better place. But most of you probably live in the corporate world, and you've got this watered-down form of the Agile virus, which is better than what went before, but it's not particularly great. So corporate Agile has a weakened form of the virus. It has a high R value. It reproduces very quickly, particularly in the presence of consultants. However, if we were to measure its effectiveness, let's call this E, you find effectiveness is lagging. It may still be better than what went before, but it doesn't really satisfy the Agile dream. I know some of you were still at school a few years ago. Some of you, like me, were in the industry in the year 2000 when we went through the hell of Y2K and waterfall. We've just been told to do waterfall properly. And when Agile appeared, we had this dream that the world would be so much better and everything could be, and that's what still motivates us. But in corporate Agile, it's watered down. So corporate Agile, most of the administration processes remain intact. You probably still have a PMO. You still have project managers. You're still filling in leave request forms. You've probably got electronic tracking system. Faith in planning remains. As you know from yesterday, I'm rather cynical about planning, but there's a faith in corporations that if we can plan it, we can do it. Yeah. That's fine. That might be fine if you're building a building, a tunnel, a bridge. Although your record on building bridges wasn't too great, if I recall. But when it comes to doing something innovative, and in software you're always doing something innovative. If you're not, Control-C, Control-V, you've got it. It's not great, but our governance processes are still tackled towards our faith in planning, that our plans are correct, and we just need to ensure we stay on plan. This adds up to a motivation. Staff aren't motivated, and there's not a lot of fun in the environment. There's a lack of experimentation. You do not want one size fits all. You want all your teams experimenting. You want them all trying to mutate the virus. You want them all to be learning from each other. You don't want a corporate Agile which you're rolling out and giving to people. Ultimately, there's a lack in learning. people aren't learning, teams aren't learning, you're not advancing forward. You know, my definition of agile, you're only agile if you're working differently to the way you did 3 months ago. If you're doing the things the same as you did 3 months ago, you're not agile, you're not changing, you're not learning. Agile means change. And importantly, as I said a moment ago, there's a lack of unlearning. You're not letting go of the things that may have brought you success in the past. They may have brought you failure in the past. But you're not letting stuff go. You're just adding new stuff. So this commoditization of Agile to make it acceptable, it undermines the effectiveness. And it also undermines competitive advantage. You know, every bank in the world is trying to be Agile. And almost all of them suck. But if they don't try and be agile, they're going to be outcompeted by, you know, their peers and by a new generation of banks. But because they're risk averse, they roll out this mild form of corporate agile. But there's less competitive advantage to doing it. It's just table stakes. So, as I say, it's better than it was before, but it's unsatisfying. So, can OKRs help? Let's see. I think they offer an alternative to the project model. Some of you know I've been here in the past and I've slagged off the project model. But still there's a need to have a think beyond the current sprint. And that's what the project model kind of filled in, that mid-range planning. And I think OKRs can help out there. And I think used in an agile, sympathetic way, they can enhance autonomy on a team. Talk about that more in a moment. So if you hear me talk about no projects, you read my book, Continuous Digital, you talk about value streams, products over projects, teams over projects, or even, heaven forbid, the Spotify model. They're all no projects model. They don't contain the word projects in them. They're all offering some alternative to write it all out and plan it. OKRs have been established at Intel and Google. Even Bono uses them. So they're well-liked by consultants. They're unthreatening to managers. And they fit well with Agile. They're iterative. We can think of them as test-driven. They can support independent units, and they're outcome-orientated. They look very Agile. And importantly, they allow for failure. You know, famously, Google say 70%, you want to meet 70% of your OKRs. If you get more than 70%, if you get 100%, that's failure. You weren't being ambitious enough. You were gaming the metrics. Yeah? So they should be failure tolerant, but you do not become failure tolerant by introducing OKRs. You need an organization which is failure tolerant to pursue that kind of ambition in OKRs. Importantly, objectives are not epics. You know, most of you have been exposed to user stories, and if you've seen them, the first instance is look at OKRs and say, oh, objectives are the epics, and the key results are my stories. No. Objectives are a hypothesis about the outcome that will make the world a better place. Yes, you may need to write some stories to implement them, but that does not mean the key results are themselves stories. You're better off thinking of the key results as the acceptance criteria. The epic is the outcome, bigger than the objective is the outcome. It's big, it's probably even bigger than an epic. It's a big thing you want to get. And the key results are the key acceptance criteria, the things you're looking for, the attributes, the properties, the capabilities, and they make it testable. I've heard it said that the objective is subjective and the key results are objective. And when you make your key results objective and when you put numbers against them, they make them testable. Yeah? Hopefully you can write an automated test, but you can also at least manually test them. Did we get to 70%? Did we get to 60%? Did we double the speed? And once you say that, I hope the penny's dropping. Oops, where were we? This is a form of test-first management. This is a very familiar model. This is saying the objective is the thing we are going to try and bring about. The key results are the tests we are going to apply, the criteria we need to make. Therefore, we've just done a test-first exercise. Wonderful. TDD, BDD, OKRs. And OKRs can enhance team autonomy. Unfortunately, there is a tendency with people with senior titles, shall we say, to see OKRs and say, hey, this is a new way of me telling them what to do. Because those programmers, they're bullshit enough anyway, and they got this agile thing, and so they never do what I want them to do. But if I use this OKR mechanism, I can tell them what to do, and it's okay because Google do that, and if Google do it, it must be good. Yeah, if we just add OKRs to our company, we will become Google. Works like that, doesn't it? So you get this model where, OKRs can create space for autonomy. What we're doing is we're saying, here's the team. We put a box around the team. The team are going to set their OKRs, and they're going to say to the rest of the organization, this is what we are setting out to do in the next period. And it's normally a quarter. It can be a bit less, can be a bit more, but it's normally a quarter. This is what we are aiming to do in the next quarter. Does that sound familiar? To me, that sounds like an API for the team. This is the team saying to the organization, here's our objective, or maybe several objectives, but certainly only 4 at most, 3 at most. As you twist my arm, I'll say 4, but yeah, a limited number of objectives. This is what you can expect from us this quarter. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the time we're going to do it in. It's an API. So the team create this API, and like any API, as long as they fulfill the interface, things work. What they do behind the API, what they do in the background, that's a black box. The team find their way of working most effectively. Because the team have got a unique set of people, and they may have technologies no one else is using, or some combination no one else is using. The team organize themselves to deliver those objectives behind that API. So it's the outcome that matters, not the how. And again, contrast that with corporate Agile, where you are told how to do things. Here is a process. Here's an 800-page book with a process in. Follow that book. Yeah? The team can decide for themselves, and teams can be different. OKRs originally come from management by objective, where managers set objectives and they handed them out to people and they cascaded down the organization. So the people at the top told the people at the middle, and then people at the middle told the people at the bottom. Yeah. I'm sure this is familiar to you. And some people look at OKRs and this is what they see. And some people look at OKRs and they hear they come from management by objectives, so they assume this is how it should be. And some people do this. I've even heard it said that objective for one team has an objective, and the key results are handed off to other teams, and they get cascaded down. So my team has an objective. I write some key results. I give these people here the key results. They magically turn into objectives for their team. They write some key results. They hand the key results to the people behind them. They magically turn into objectives. They write some key results. And yeah, it cascades. That isn't very agile, is it? I call that cascading OKRs, and it's not happy because it's just not agile. Maybe that's how it worked in Intel in 1970, but I don't think that's how we want to interpret it in 2022, 2023 in an agile world. This would be a return to command and control. It would rob us of our autonomy, and unfortunately, you hear of people doing it. So my model, the way I think we should be doing it, our managers, our leaders, they set the destination. They paint a picture of a shining city on a hill. They talk about the organizational purpose. They may set some missions, may say, group over here, you've got one mission. Group over here, you've got another mission. Those missions build towards our purpose. But that's what our leaders do. They talk about purpose, they talk about missions, maybe they allocate resources. When Chris was talking about Redgate, and Redgate at the start of each year, each cycle, the management team decide how they're going to allocate their resources, and then they fit the teams around it, and the teams are then empowered, I hate that word, given autonomy to go off and meet those objectives with those resources. So that's what our leaders do. And we have our teams down here. And as we move away from the project model, this idea that we wantonly break up performing teams has gone away. We might reorganize our teams, we might reteam, but it's not the way we used to do projects, where a project manager pulls a random group of people together, some of which he found on a street corner, and says, thou art a team, and you do something, and when the project is done, you dismiss them all. We have our teams, and our teams are centered around our core capabilities, our products, our value streams, whatever. So our leaders set the destination, and then we leave white space. We deliberately leave white space there in the middle. Now that may sound neglectful. Maybe the people at the top should be feeding down how to do this, but I don't think so. Because the experts in how to do things are the people at the bottom. The people down here, the people who do the work, the people who instruct the machines, they know what the machines are capable of. They know what their technology is capable of. They have product owners, managers, business analysts, whoever in the team who understand what those customers want. They know the competing demands on their time, as well as developing new functionality. There's DevOps, and there's customer support, and there's this, and there's that, and the other. Those people at the bottom know the work best of all. They set the destination, they know the work. So the people at the top say, how can you help? How can this team, with your capabilities and your products, operating your value streams, whatever, how can you help achieve our destination? And the teams respond every quarter by coming back and saying, these are our OKRs. This is what we want to do. These are our objectives. So rather than thinking of it as top down, start to think of it as bottom up. Yes, the leadership sets the missions and purpose and culture, but it's the people at the bottom, the people doing the work who respond. But it's not a one-way street. It is not simply a case of the people who do the work responding and telling those higher up how they're going to do. This is a shared responsibility. This is collaboration. This is a conversation. No team is an island. Those teams need to talk to each other, and they need to talk to their leaders. So let's stop thinking of it as top-down or bottom-up. Let's blow up the hierarchy. Yeah? How often have you heard people talk about getting rid of hierarchies, flat organizations? But doesn't everyone have an organizational chart? When you walk into a new company, isn't the first thing you want to see the organizational chart? Let's get rid of that structure chart. What we need is this. Think of it more as concentric circles. Think of it as the sun. Think of it as the planets orbiting the sun and the moons orbiting the planets. Every one of you has a relationship with the top person or persons in your organization. Every one of you knows there is somebody at the top, and most of you can probably name them. Some of you work in the office next to that person, and you have a really close relationship with the top leader. Some of you work in a remote office, maybe even thousands of kilometers from that person, and you're much more remote. Some of you are like Venus and Mercury in a tight orbit, and some of you are like Uranus and Saturn out there, way out. But you coordinate with each other. So it's not just a case of us telling you or you telling me. Each team talks about the objectives it's going to set, and they share them. They share them with their leadership. They say, these are the objectives we're going to set. What do you think? Is this a good idea? Is this doing the kind of thing you expect? Oh, there's something missing you'd like. Well, maybe there's a reason we can't do that. Or maybe we need to talk about how we put that in. If we put that in, something else has to give. And it's a conversation. And the teams also talk to the other teams. If you need something from another team, you ask them and they ask you. It's not a one-way street. You collaborate and you set the objectives with respect to your customers and your leadership and the company strategy and everything else. So it's cooperation and communication. And if during that process you find that your leadership really don't like your objectives, it may well be because they have failed to communicate the organizational strategy. It may well be that they have an organizational strategy, but it doesn't fit in your world. Their strategy won't work for your customers, and you're responding to your customers. And in doing that, you've exposed an issue. You've got visibility on a problem. You've got visibility on something you need to work on. And you can talk about why what your team is doing is not what that team over there expects. Why what this team is doing doesn't appear to contribute to the strategy of the organization. And you can out those problems and you can talk about those problems. It's a two-way conversation. Ultimately, change the metaphor, I think of it like a pond or a lake, and the raindrops are dropping in. And your team is one of those, at the center of one of those circles. But you've got your CEO, your top person telling you what they think you should do, what the company's trying to do. And you find your competitors are doing things. And sometimes you have to respond to your competitors, not to your CEO. And sometimes you've got your customers saying you want to do something. And sometimes what your customer wants doesn't fit in with what your CEO or your competitor think you should be doing. And your team's going so confused on what you should be doing. And there's other teams. There's other teams expecting things. Oh, and as Jenny would point out this morning, there's hackers trying to break in and disrupt you. You know, your team has got all this information coming into you. So your team is best positioned to look at all the demands coming into your team and say, in the next 12 weeks, this is how we're going to respond. This is what we're going to try and do. And it's not a long list of things. It's not a backlog. It's big, meaty things. It's a few big, meaty things. In fact, some people would say one big, meaty thing. So, an organization has purpose. It exists to benefit society, as I said yesterday. Within that purpose, you have missions, or perhaps they're the same thing, or perhaps there's multiple missions in the organization. Perhaps your team has its own special missions. And within that, every quarter, you come along and you reset your OKRs. Amazon have a technique called day one. And Jeff Bezos used to like to say, every day is day one at Amazon. And the idea was that you came in every day and you thought like a startup. You didn't just do the things yesterday because you did them yesterday and you'll carry on doing them today. Every day you came in and you were thinking about, what are we trying to do to make this company better? What are we trying to do to satisfy our customers? And if you find that the things you were doing yesterday no longer make sense, then you don't keep doing them just because you were doing them yesterday. You're prepared to wipe the slate clean and start over again. And this is what I'm saying we should do with OKRs. Every time you go around the cycle, probably every quarter, you say, let's pretend nothing we've done before. There's no work in progress. There's no nothing. What do we know about our customers? What do we know about our mission? What do we know about the organization? What can we do in the next 12 weeks that will add the most value here? So this will supercharge your prioritization. I said your team has lots of sources of work. You've got the famous backlog because you're all doing Scrum and your backlog goes on and on and on. You've got your support desk. Yeah? Many of the teams I've worked in over the years, we have to respond to what the support desk says. Usually we're not first line, we're second or third line. But customers will be raising issues and we'll have to do something. Increasingly we've got DevOps, or as we used to call it, operations. I hope your team is doing DevOps. I hope you're not working with a DevOps team. Yeah? If you have a dedicated DevOps team, be honest, call them operations. But there's every chance you've got to do something. If you're not actually doing the operations yourself, you've got to at least package your things to the operations department in the format they can use. And if things stop working in operations, you've got to respond. And heaven forbid there's a hack. Or heaven forbid you suddenly find that you're using log4j, J for log rather. You see how stressful it is standing on stage? Log4j. Okay? You don't want to be using something that you suddenly have to patch. You've got all these things coming in. Maybe your sales team is coming up to you saying, oh, can we borrow an engineer to go and visit a customer? Oh, can you prioritize this feature for a customer? Oh, can you paint it blue with yellow spots for this customer? Yeah? I'd like to think those requests are coming through your product owner, and your product owner is saying no, but I like to think, I like to dream. Maybe your customers are coming to you directly. You know, those poor guys on the IKEA stand, how many of us have been up to them and criticized them about their software, or tell them, can they just change this on the web, or can they have more Billies in stock? You know, customers sometimes speak to us directly. Oh, and you have history. You have legacy. You move from one team in a company to another team in a company, and occasionally people from the old team come along and start saying, do you remember that thing you wrote 6 months ago? None of us know anything about it. Can we borrow you for a few days? Can you come over here? Yeah? You come with baggage. So these demands are coming in. So your team is busy enough. It's got all these sources of work. And so if some bright spot comes along and says, oh, let's add OKRs, we've not taken anything away. Adding OKRs to this mix is only going to increase your work in progress. I've heard of teams where they're doing all of this, and somebody decides OKRs are a good idea. And it's like, if we add OKRs, the team will suddenly have an extra 8 hours in a day to do the OKRs, and nothing else is taken away. You know, simply adding OKRs to this mix is not going to improve things. At best, you will increase your work in progress, which will reduce your delivery capacity. Okay? So what should we remove? Well, as a first step, we need to orientate our work around OKRs. You need to make everything subservient to OKRs. So you only do support desk calls if one of your OKRs says you have responsibility for support desk. You only do DevOps if you acknowledge it in your OKRs. You only do sales. You only talk to customers. You only respect your history. Now, that gets me into trouble sometimes. So some people say, no, OKRs are only about shiny new things. And I would like to agree, but the problem is, when you take your OKRs to other people, particularly senior people, and say, here's the things we're going to do, if your OKRs do not acknowledge, then in addition to building shiny new things, you need to help the support desk, do some DevOps, help the salespeople, talk to your customers and respect your history, then it's kind of, they're going to look at your OKRs and say, you're not doing very much, are you? Somewhere in the process, you have to say to people looking at OKRs, the reason our team are not doing very much is we've got all this other stuff to do. So at the very least, I think there's an objective 0 in there, a business as usual OKR, which says, you know, something about acknowledging everything else. It may not be new, it may not be shiny, it may be about revenue protection rather than getting new revenue. But you are acknowledging that as well as doing all those OKRs, you've got all this other stuff to do, right? And we have to acknowledge that. So don't get out of bed in the morning if it's not in your OKRs. Yeah. You're pursuing objectives. You need to reorientate your work around the pursuit of OKRs. So you go to your planning meetings and you're saying, right, here's our OKRs, here's our objectives. What can we do in the next sprint? What can we do in the next few days that will advance us on those OKRs? Putting your OKRs on the wall and looking at them halfway through the 12-week period doesn't cut the mustard. If you're working in agile fashion, OKRs should be an essential part of your planning meeting. Every planning meeting, you're looking at your OKRs again and saying, how are we doing? Are we progressing towards these OKRs? What are we going to do to move ourselves forward? Which creates a slight problem. Do you do what the backlog says you should do, or do you do what the OKRs should say what you should do? Now, some people tell me the OKRs are a mechanism for sorting and prioritizing the backlog, which sounds good until you think, what if there's something you need to do that is not in the backlog? Would you create it if the OKR says do something? If you need to do something, it's not, would you create it? And once you start to say, well, okay, if it's in the objective and not in the backlog, we create it in the backlog. You're giving the OKRs supremacy over the backlog. And then you start to say, well, do we really need a backlog? But if you've got a backlog and an OKR, potentially they come into conflict. Potentially you're constantly having to decide, are we burning down more backlog items or are we pursuing our objective? So I've come to the conclusion you should throw your backlog away. Yeah, people are already shaking their heads. If you're going to adopt OKRs, something's got to give. So here's the deal. We're given a mission. We think about it, we analyze it, we may even plan it, we come up with the perfect plan, we populate the perfect backlog. And every 3 months, we set OKRs and we execute our perfect plan. Why are you bothering with OKRs? If you've got the perfect backlog, if you've got the perfect plan, why do you need OKRs in addition? Conversely, if every 3 months you're looking around and saying, what do we need to do now? You could trust yourself to write just enough backlog for the here and now. If you are on the right path, if you have analyzed the customer need correctly, if you are putting products out into the market and customers are responding and you're going to do more of that, if you're on the right path, then stopping every few weeks and saying, are we sure we're going in the right direction? You're going to find the answer is yes, 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 yes. So I don't think you really need a backlog. I think you can let OKRs drive your work. I think you can see the OKRs as a story-generating machine. You can use OKRs as a just-in-time story generator. Instead of having a backlog of 1,000 items that you're supposed to do, you can have OKRs to say, here's the big objectives we're aiming towards. We're not going to do those 50 items. We've got this generator, and every time we need work to do, we crank up the generator, and it spits out some stories, and we deliver those stories. And that way we can keep focus on our objectives and not get lost in the woods. So think strategically. Think about those objectives. Think about where you're going. Think about the outcomes, not the output. It's not about doing 20 stories an iteration. It's about the outcomes. It's about the benefit you bring to your customers and to the world. Move away from the tyranny of the backlog, where you've just got backlog to do. Be more purposeful. And put the purpose ahead of the backlog. And if you find there are backlog items you're never going to do, delete them. Don't just leave them to rot in the backlog. You know, it costs almost nothing to put an item into the backlog. And so we do it. But, you know, when you put that item in, you're already thinking, that's never going to get prioritized. That's never going to fight its way to the top. And when it's been sitting there for 6 months and it's never been done, are you being truthful to your stakeholders? Are you being honest when they say to you, how are you doing with that item? You go, oh yeah, it's still in the backlog. We'll get to it one day. Yeah? The world will come to an end before you get to that backlog item. Because there'll always be something more important. You know, we sometimes say in English, you're being economical with the truth. Yes, the item is in the backlog. Yes, one day we might get to it. What you're not saying is, it's so low value, it will always be outcompeted. That's an expensive conversation to have, to say, no, we won't put this in the backlog because it doesn't make sense. That's expensive, so we take the easy route out. So every sprint, review your OKR status, think about the highest priorities, what do we need to advance, what stories do we need. If they're in a backlog, if you've got one you prepared earlier, by all means use it. But don't let that stop you from writing new ones that will move you forward. And when it comes to thinking about success, the easy thing to do is to go down your objectives and tick them and cross them. But actually, when you do that, you start to game the system. So when you want to say, are we being successful? I want you to take one step back, and I want you to think a bit more broadly. Success is not hitting 100% of your OKRs. And that might come as a shock to some of your stakeholders who are looking for 100% predictability. Success is not even hitting 70% of your OKRs as reputedly Google aim for. Because if you target 70%, 70% will be the new 100% and you'll game the system again. Success is the outcomes you create. Success is the value add, the benefit you make, the advancement on your mission, the furthering of your purpose, making society a better place. The learning, the knowledge you've created. These are things which it's difficult to capture, but these are the things that build toward long-term success, and long-term success is a bit more fuzzy than short-term success. 45 minutes, 9 seconds. I think we can take a couple of questions. I don't think the next session is starting immediately. Thank you very much.